topic of discussion for today is hiring a manager and kind of just pros and cons, going through a few different options here. So I'll kind of list them off, and then I'll have Laura kind of share her thoughts and insights on it, since she's actually running it and training managers and all that kind of stuff. So kind of comparing and contrasting different ideas here, right? Like we've talked before about, hiring the quote unquote director. And so I'll use two different terms. I'll use the word manager and I'll use the word director. So director being someone who you're paying more, right? You're paying, $70,000 to $100,000 a year. When you go on like Indeed and you look up, assisted living director, and you see all the, generally, at least around here in Texas, most of them are like on the low end 60 up to 90 or 100 for someone who has experience working as a director in the industry. So there's that person, right? One option is, okay, you're gonna hire this one person who potentially has a lot of experience, who's already been the lead person running an assisted living prior to this. Or the other options, do you hire a manager? So we'll dig into this a bit also. So whether do you hire one manager, or do you hire two managers, or a third option, do you hire like one manager and have perhaps like an assistant manager who perhaps is hourly? So we've done both of these now, and I wanted to have Laura kind of take the floor on this and share her thoughts and insights as she's been through both of these things. And I just kind of want her to go through and just share her thoughts on like, okay, what's working, what's most efficient? Is two managers overkill? Is one director not enough? Do you need like two managers? Can you have one and an assistant manager? Does that person have to be salary? Can they be hourly? Like lots of different things here. And I would say, even before we get into this, that there's no right or wrong way to go. All options will work. All options are good, but some of them will be, it'll be more of a judgment call based on what it is that you're looking for. And perhaps when you're new, it's different than when you're 1 or 2 years in. It's a kind of different story, and it's definitely a different story for us now than it was when we first started a couple of years ago. So, Laura, why don't you share your thoughts and just what talk through it? What do you think is the best? What do you think is everything we just talked about?
Yeah, so I guess I want to start off by saying I'm glad that we are able to like help y'all through this, because we're actually going through it ourselves, right? Like there's a lot of people out there who may be teaching in different aspects and different roles and different things that don't actually have the experience in it. But what I love about like what we're telling you now is like, hey, we've gone through it all, and like we're just telling you literally like how we're going about it. And so, take it how you want, leave it, you can take it if you like it or not. And like Brett said, there's various different ways to go about this. So I guess I'll first off by saying when we first got into this, I think we were told or taught that this is a very passive business, that it was something that you're not going to be involved in, that you'll just hire someone with experience and they'll just take it over, and you won't really have much, as much hours involved and work involved. And I think after kind of going through it all this past 2.5 years, I think that's definitely not the case. There were many shifts that I ran because we were short staffed, and COVID, and with everything that happened, right? Like unexpected things that happened that I had to jump in. And so I think now, looking back from this past 2.5 years, I think what I've learned the most is that I should have known every role from the very beginning. So I think that it's important to not just let your director or manager just kind of take over. I think it's important that you, even if you're learning together in the beginning, you're just opening and you hired somebody, that you are alongside them the entire time, learning it along with them and not just letting them go free rein. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me personally throughout this whole process was, hey, I didn't know anything with healthcare. I knew real estate. And so, yeah, I'll just hire someone with experience and I'll let them go and let them do their thing. But I should have been doing it and learning it with them. So I knew what to expect. So I knew what to do in case, something were to happen to them. And so that's my biggest takeaway from all this. I feel like within a short span of time, I pretty much knew everything. I jumped in, I had to, get stuff done. So, with that being said, the role is not that difficult. Just like throwing it out there, like, yes, it's a lot of work to stay on top of, but if you're on top of it every day, it's very simple. And so I think that there are benefits to having one, director who's professional, who's, been doing this for years. But then there's also a lot of benefits of having two managers who are lower paid, that you can kind of train them how you want them to run the place, right? Like, and so I think that there's both options are great. It just depends on what you want for your home. I think that since we have two managers now that we're training up, I personally like the idea that I have someone to fall back on. Like, so if one person needs to go on vacation, the other one comes in and stays there for the whole week while the other one's on vacation, and vice versa. Or if one of them gets sick or one of their kids gets sick, they have to go. At least there's a backup. So whereas before I was the backup. So if, that person got sick, I was there. If that person's kid got sick, I was there. If anything happened, I was there. And so not that I didn't want to be there, that kind of wasn't really how we wanted to structure things. And so I personally really, really love the two manager roles I think that we're taking on now. It's a little bit easier for us to kind of incorporate that now because we brought up two caregivers who had been with us for a long time. So these two caregivers, one of them had been with us for 1.5 years and the other one maybe 7 or 8 months. But they know the residents, they know the families, they know the hospice companies, they know our NP who's in house, they know the dentist that comes in. And so they have relationships with everybody. And they know the medication that everyone's taking. And so it wasn't a huge, overwhelming role for them to take on. And so that is kind of the benefit of us being open a little more, right? And then kind of just promoting from within. Whereas if you're first starting, it's not necessarily you're gonna be able to do that, right? Like when your first day you open, you'll have a manager there that maybe just doesn't have an experience at all, and you're gonna learn along with them. And so I feel like I'm rambling. Okay. All right. So as far as training the managers that we have now, like I said, they're caregivers that we promoted up. And what I love about both of them is that they both are like yin and yang for each other, right? One of them is very much the kind, sweet individual that will be perfect for the families. So she'll be great for like being the face of Platinum. She'll do the tours. She'll call families and update families on, their loved ones. Whereas the other individual that we hired on, she's a little bit more like straightforward, a little bit edgier and harder, if that makes sense, but like not in a bad way. So she's going to be over like the staff and training staff and doing the onboarding with hiring individuals. And so they each have their own role, and they love each other. Like they work great with each other. They used to work the same shift together. And so that is also super important too, if you're going to decide the route of having two managers, is making sure that they're not the same personality, because they're going to have different roles for both of them. And so I think I don't even know what book it's called, Traction, maybe it talks about like having the right people in the right seat, because you can have the right people, but they're in the wrong seat, like they're going to be terrible for that position. And so I definitely think they're both the right people in the right seat, and they're going to really take on their role with like flourishing, because I know that you know, if I take the harder, edgier manager and put her with the families, I just know that it would be the wrong seat for her. And so that's something that I think that you should take into consideration, is making sure that their personality fits the role that you're putting them in. And so Brett can kind of go into more detail as far as like how we divvy that up and kind of how we're going about that. And to be completely honest with you, we're structuring it right now. So it's something that we're kind of in the process of doing. And so we're going to be learning along the way, and we'll share that with you. But so we kind of took the whole like management role and kind of divvied it up into 2 sections based on like what we thought would be best for them and the personality. And so, like I said, you guys can restructure that too, however you want, if you have different personalities that would fit better for a specific role. But sorry, go ahead.
No. So regarding that, like we can do another call on that. I'm going through the whole procedure on management training, and it's very, very long. So that would be a great call for another time. And yeah, so we can circle back on another time, but I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, they're good. If you had another question for me or not.
So just let me kind of maybe transition this, and we'll do a little kind of bounce back and forth so everyone can benefit from some of these conversations that we've had. So most important takeaway for you, and I would agree with this, is that you should know your entire business. You should know how to do every single job duty of every caregiver, every chef, every manager, everything. You should know how to do it yourself, right? You should be an expert at that stuff. Now, that's easy to say when you fast forward a few years, right? But when you're just getting started at it, we've talked about maybe as you're in their seats and you're going to be opening up soon, and you obviously can't promote 2 of your best caregivers to managers because you don't have caregivers yet, right?
Yeah.
Do you start with, so let's talk through some of these options, right? We've talked about, okay, you have 1 director, then maybe you pay a higher amount, or do you bring on someone who's a manager? And if I would think that person, they don't have to have like a director experience. They can have maybe management experience, or maybe just caregiver experience, right? There's plenty of people who have been working in assisted living for, several years or so, and they may be a great fit to bring up to promote to a manager. And so here's kind of my thoughts on this. Is if you have systems for things, you don't necessarily have to have all the experience that are needed, right? Like you can take someone with a heart and some experience, like the floor experience, right? Which is pretty much the majority of this job anyways. If you have that and then had a structure for the actual like management stuff, and then you just learned it together, maybe another option. Where again, maybe you're only paying $25 an hour or something to that effect, right? Are you 45 grand to 60,000 for just bringing on 1 manager? And this is maybe how I would do it if I was going to start again brand new. And I had Laura to teach me this, and I had a structure. I think that's super important. I wouldn't just jump into it with not knowing anything, because you don't know what you don't know. But if you can take our management system and structure and say, okay, here are the 9 breakdowns of all the roles of a manager, and let's go through all these processes one at a time and learn it together. I think it adds to the 2 different points here that are super important. One being that as the owner, all the roles of the job. And the second part being that you have 2 people here. Now, I think that's super important for both of us, because we have multiple businesses, and we're not trying to be owner operators. We're trying to work on the business to scale the business. We're not trying to work in the business. And I really do believe that you need 2 people on a management team in order to do that. Because I mean, most of the time you really only need 1, but there are plenty of times where life just happens and you need 2 people. And Laura was the backup person, and it stopped us from growing our other businesses. And so for us, that was super important. So if you're going to look at it this way, and you're starting out brand new, and you're going to get your license here in a couple of months, I would maybe consider this as an option too. You don't necessarily have to go hire the biggest BA director and pay 90 grand or something like higher like that. Maybe you pay $25 an hour or whatever equivalent that is as a salary. and you take the systems, and you still need two people, right? Yourself is one of those persons, because you need to spend the first probably year or so learning to run it, learning it yourself, right? So now you have yourself who's learning it, and you're learning it together with this person. We'll call the manager as opposed to director. Now there's still two of you, right? You're learning it all together, and you're continuing to back away, continuing to back off as you are hopefully finding that your manager is a good fit. Because if they're not, then you're just going to have to switch over and start again. But hopefully you find a good person first try, second try, and it allows you to learn the systems together. And then this is kind of what I would think if I was going to do it again for the first time. If I had the systems, I want two people. I'm going to bring up that one manager, and maybe they're in that like 50 grand kind of range. And then I'm going to find my best caregiver, and I'm going to make them an assistant manager, and perhaps they're hourly. And maybe it's just an extra, maybe they're on the floor 3 days and working as an assistant manager 2 days. But I want backups, right? If somebody leaves, you don't want to be the only person there. So I would probably maybe transition up maybe you call it like a 1.5 manager thing, right? You're there, you're learning everything, and now you maybe develop a 1.5 manager system within maybe 6 months of being open, because you're promoting your best caregiver. Now that allows you to have two different things. One, it allows you to maybe after however many months, maybe you can do it in a year, get all stabilized, everything, grow your culture, and now you're out. Now you're working on the business, you're marketing, you're building your reputation, your culture, your brand, and you bring up that assistant manager, and now you have two managers. And perhaps you do go that route, right? Or maybe you just keep them as a 1.5. And I'll fall back with you in a couple minutes here to get your opinion on how much actual hours you need on the floor to do this. But I think this would be a way that I would highly consider, because there is advantages and there's clear disadvantages to hiring like that director that has the experience, because that person is going to have their ways and they're going to want to do it their way. And you as the owner and me as the owner, with as I'm going through and learning everything, you may not know like if this is the right way or not. Because to be totally honest, all of the paperwork, all of the state's policies and stuff are intentionally written in the gray area so that they don't have to have liability on them. A lot of this stuff is like pretty ambiguous, and it's like, well, they say this, but they kind of say it's a not a requirement, but a recommendation. And then when they come in to do an inspection, they ask for that stuff, but they said it's a requirement, not a recommendation, or vice versa. So they intentionally set it up to be a little confusing, and so it's easy enough to default to whatever the person with the experience says, and like, okay, cool, we'll do that. But especially if they come from big box and small are like apples and oranges. The codes are so drastically different. So again, I would consider these things. I think if it was me, I would go the route of taking the systems, taking myself and hiring one manager. Hopefully you get it right the first time, and learning it together, and then promoting an assistant, and then phasing myself out. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, to be completely honest with you, like I just, in the beginning, I was so scared. Like I just was like, I have kids and I got stuff to do, and I don't really want to take on any of the role. Like I just want someone to just take it over. And I think that was my biggest flaw in the whole thing, to be completely honest, is like I should have been more of the owner operator in the beginning and learned everything alongside with this person. So going back to what Brett said, I think that hiring that one manager and learning everything with that person for like 6 to 9 months alongside them, and then slowly kind of releasing more of the responsibility to them, like answering the phones or talking to the families or doing the interviews, or like little things, right? Like it's just one little thing at a time that you'll probably slowly be releasing to them. But I think first and foremost, when you're interviewing, make sure you like them. Like I think that's super important, because if you're going to be working alongside them and learning with them, you need to be able to get along. Your personalities, need to not clash. They need to have the same vision and heart as you. I think that's super important too. And so if they don't like people, or they, like they just don't communicate well, I think that's going to be hard for them to take that role on. they need to be kind, they need to be loving, they need to know how to communicate appropriately to doctors and to families, and to residents and to staff. I mean, everything, right? Like they need to have a very kind and loving demeanor, because that is literally what's going to make your entire business the what is the word, the energy, right? When people come into your house, like if there's just like a weird communication going on with everybody, like they're gonna feel it, right? Like people feel that. So I think just having that kind, warm, loving heart and that personality that you get along with, I think is vital. And so I don't think that they necessarily have to have manager experience. I don't know. You may think differently, but I think that you can learn alongside them. Like I said, the role is not that hard. I think I really want to come across with that. Like, as long as you care for people and you literally have the best intentions for your residents and for your staff, like it's not hard. So this whole like I have to work 70, 80 hours a week, like that's not realistic. That's not how it's going to be. And so like I said, just keeping on top of your medications and making sure that things are in order and that you're communicating with the families. I mean, it's no more than a 50-hour a week job, unless people call in. I think that's the only thing. Unless you have a staff member that calls out, then you'll be working, an 8 or 12-hour shift, which will, up the hourly on that week. But I think if you are loving your staff and you're treating them appropriate, you're having fun when you have the staff trainings, you're complimenting, you're giving little gifts, and you're making it a fun environment for them, I don't think you're going to have that many call outs. So that's something to consider as well.
So two things that I want to follow up on you talked about is one, the amount of time that you actually need for a manager. And the second item is you say it's not that difficult. Like, can you speak to what is the difficult parts, and kind of just answer both these kind of questions. So how much time first?
Okay.
When things are stable, do you need for a manager, and why then did we choose the route to go 100 hours by having two ladies there 50 hours?
So I think that it really only takes, I would say, 40 hours a week. It's a basic work week. And I think that the hardest thing for me to learn, or that I did learn, was the medical aspect of it. So like, I think because I don't have a medical background, I just real estate background. And so, when the doctor wrote a prescription and it said like BID, all this stuff. And I'm like, can you just write in English? I literally told her, I'm like, can you write the order in English? Like, I know that's medical terms, but like, and I'll learn it eventually, but can you just tell me like by mouth 4 times a day instead of all these acronyms and stuff like that? And so I think the medication and the doctor aspect of things was probably the hardest thing for me to learn. Learning the difference between hospice and home health. Like, I didn't know the difference. Like, what is the difference? And so it was the medical aspect of everything that was the hardest thing for me to learn. So if you have that background, like, I think this would probably be a lot easier for you. And so personally, that was something that I had to try to learn slowly. Everything else about it, it's people, right? I love people. That's my thing. I love communicating. I love building relationships. I have a heart for people. And so that aspect of it was really easy for me. So I can communicate easily to families. I can communicate easily to the residents and the staff because I love people. And so, but if you don't have that personality, maybe you're more closed off and reserved, like that might be hard for you. And so I think everybody's going to be different on what is going to be difficult for them to grasp and learn.
Okay. So if you think like you only need a 40-hour week, why did we choose to hire two managers instead of one?
Well, it's pretty much what you said earlier, is like, I want to have someone else to fall back on. I don't want to be that person that's the backup all the time. I really have a passion to build Platinum and to expand, and that's what we're doing. And so I feel like if I keep getting pulled back into running a shift or pulled back into making, putting out fires at Platinum, like not literal fires, but like drama or something, whatever maybe, I didn't want to be that backup. I wanted to have someone else be the backup so that I can focus on, working on the business and expanding our other businesses.
Yeah. So from us, it was pretty much a numbers decision to hire a second person. So realistically, we're paying 55 per manager. So again, it's like we could have gone just and paid 55, right? Like and did fine. So why spend an extra $55,000 a year because of our time, right? Like because of her time, because of my time, like it's worth it to us to invest that extra money for smoothness so that we can go expand.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you need two managers. I'm certain you do not need two managers, but at sometimes like things get very, very stable and chill. And then sometimes crap just happens, right? Like that's just life. Like you have 3 caregivers quit or something, or whatever happens, right? Like during those rocky times, we didn't want to be called in for that kind of stuff. So it was worth it to pay the extra money for like the small percentage of the time when that does happen. And I think because it's just what is your time worth to you, right? Like we can go do some more bigger deals and do real estate and some of these other things that we do that will make us way more than 55,000. So it was just that's something to consider, but I don't think it's necessary. And I do think that perhaps if you want to have 2 people there, you could maybe look at a 1.5 option, right? And having your best caregiver just promote and you maybe pay $25 an hour or $20 an hour, whatever the case may be. I mean, most of these caregivers are making 16. If you offer $20 an hour, 20 hours a week, like they would be so stoked on that. So that may be another option where, again, if you don't want to spend that much money, I don't really think you have to. I think that the numbers are in there, right? Like Victoria, we went through your numbers a week or 2 ago, and we looked at $100,000 for 2 managers, right? And like the numbers were strong. Like you had plenty of cushion in there to do that. If you're running a 16, there's definitely the movement, the room in there, but I don't think it's necessary. And but it may be, all of you fast forward 2 years from now, and you're like, okay, we're on our next project, and we need our time to be able to focus on this. Maybe it's worth it to you. I'm going to spend that extra money to be able to do that, and that's kind of the situation we are in now. I don't think you should do it right off the bat. Honestly, I'd maybe look at just a 1, because you need to be in there learning it, and then the second option is maybe just a 1.5, meaning like 1 manager and you're promoting somebody else for assistant.
Yeah, I think that, like Victoria, in your case, hiring just 1 manager at like 55, 60 grand, and then waiting and learning along beside them, and then waiting until you have that 1 caregiver that is like a rock star and who can handle something like that, and then just promoting them as a lead, I think is what they call it, be like a lead caregiver. So they just have a little bit more responsibility, and they could be that backup for you if you need. So I think that's something that maybe we could have done, was do the manager with the lead caregiver. And it's kind of, I could say it's kind of the same thing when you think about doing 2 managers. I mean, and you're paying a little less. Because I think that lead caregiver is going to see the value in that, knowing that they could potentially become, the manager next. And so they're going to be excited about that role, and they're going to probably want to take it on in hopes that they could, move up the ranks a little long down the road. So yeah, I think that's backup for you too, right? Like, cause I know that you have 2 little ones, and that's how I was too. I was like, I don't want to be called in if I'm like, have something going on with the girls, and I mean, it was hard the first few years because I was, and now looking back, I'm like, man, we just should have orchestrated it differently. And that's okay. You live and learn. That's why we're here to tell you, like, what we've learned and help you all along the process too. So, yeah.